At first glance, the market looks chaotic. Candles moving randomly, price pushing higher, then collapsing lower, patterns appearing, patterns failing, and most traders spend years believing the chart is simply reacting to news, or momentum, or emotion. But here's what most traders never realize. Price is not moving randomly, not even close, because underneath every major move, there is execution, hidden execution, institutional execution, and the chart is only showing you the aftermath, not the cause. When retail traders look at a strong move, they usually focus on the breakout itself, the expansion candle, the momentum, the volatility. But institutions, they focus on something completely different. They focus on where the move began, because that location is often where the real positioning occurred, not the breakout, the loading phase before the breakout. And this is where order blocks enter the picture. Most retail traders think an order block is just the last bullish candle before a bearish move, or the last bearish candle before a bullish move. But that explanation is dangerously incomplete, because the candle itself is not the important part. The candle is only evidence, a footprint, a residue left behind by institutional positioning. The real mechanism underneath an order block is liquidity acquisition and inventory transfer, and that completely changes how you interpret the chart, because institutions cannot simply click one button and enter massive positions instantly. If they did, they would move price against themselves. Their own execution would destroy their entry. So instead, they engineer liquidity. They create conditions where large amounts of orders become available, and the market structure itself becomes the trap. This is where psychology enters the equation, because retail traders provide the liquidity institutions need. Fear, greed, breakout chasing, panic selling, fear of missing out. All of it feeds the system. The market is not just a chart. It is an emotional extraction machine. And order blocks are one of the clearest footprints of that extraction process. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the market stops looking random and starts looking engineered. But if institutions need liquidity to enter positions, then the next question becomes obvious. Where does that liquidity actually come from? And this is where most traders unknowingly become the counterparty. Most traders think the market moves because buyers overpower sellers, or sellers overpower buyers. But that explanation barely scratches the surface, because the real engine underneath price movement is liquidity. Without liquidity, nothing moves. Institutions cannot enter, cannot exit, cannot scale, cannot distribute inventory. And this creates a massive problem for large players, because the larger the position, the harder it becomes to execute without revealing intent. This is why institutions are constantly searching for liquidity pockets, areas where massive amounts of stop losses, breakout entries, panic exits, and emotional decisions cluster together, because clustered emotion creates executable liquidity, and the market knows exactly where emotional traders place their orders: above highs, below lows, inside obvious breakouts, inside obvious support and resistance. This is why retail traders often feel hunted, because structurally, they are predictable. Now here's where order blocks become incredibly important. An order block often forms at the exact moment institutions successfully acquire liquidity, not after the move, before the move expands, which means the order block itself represents a zone where aggressive positioning occurred, liquidity was absorbed, inventory was transferred. The sharp move away from the zone is evidence that the imbalance became too strong to hold price in equilibrium any longer. And this is why displacement matters so much, because displacement reveals urgency. Urgency reveals imbalance, and imbalance often reveals institutional participation. But here's the psychological trap. Retail traders usually enter after displacement, after emotion, after momentum, after expansion. They wait until the move feels confirmed. And ironically, that confirmation often occurs exactly when institutions begin taking partial profits or rebalancing inventory. So the emotional trader enters late, while smart money begins unloading into their excitement. This is where losses begin, not because traders are unintelligent, but because emotion changes timing. and timing is everything in execution. But the deeper layer is this. Institutions do not just use liquidity. They engineer reactions around it. And this is where order blocks transform from simple zones into psychological traps. Now something strange starts happening. Price leaves the order block aggressively, moves away with conviction, and then later, returns. And this is the moment most traders completely misread the chart. Because emotionally, a pullback feels dangerous, especially after a strong move. Retail traders start thinking, maybe the trend is reversing. Maybe the breakout failed. Maybe I missed the move. Fear enters the system. Hesitation enters the system. Emotional uncertainty begins distorting perception. But institutions often see something entirely different. They see unfinished business. Because many institutional positions are not fully executed in one moment. Large players scale in, scale out, rebalance, refill inventory, and sometimes price revisits an order block because unfilled orders still remain inside the zone. This creates one of the most misunderstood concepts in trading. A pullback is not automatically weakness. Sometimes it is efficiency. Now watch the emotional contrast. The inexperienced trader sees price returning lower and feels panic. The institutional trader sees price returning lower and begins evaluating whether liquidity conditions remain favorable. Completely different psychology. Completely different interpretation. Same chart. This is why context matters more than pattern memorization. Because an order block inside premium liquidity, during bearish structure, after a liquidity sweep, means something entirely different than an isolated candle pattern in random market conditions. And this is exactly where most traders lose money. They memorize visuals without understanding mechanism. So they start trading every order block they see, every candle, every pullback, every imbalance, and eventually the market punishes that lack of context. Because order blocks are not magic. They are conditional footprints, and institutions constantly adapt based on a liquidity, volatility, inventory exposure, market conditions, opposing flows. This is where trading becomes less about prediction and more about probabilistic interpretation. And this completely changes how you read the chart. But here's where it gets even deeper. Because not every order block succeeds, and the failures themselves reveal hidden information about the market. Order blocks were never about rectangles on a chart. They were never about memorizing candle patterns. And they were never designed to give certainty. They are footprints, evidence, traces left behind by institutional behavior. But the deeper lesson is psychological, because the market is constantly exposing emotional weakness, impatience, fear, greed, overconfidence, the need to be right. And the traders who survive are not the ones who predict perfectly. They are the ones who remain emotionally stable while uncertainty unfolds. This is why professional trading looks boring. Because discipline is emotionally quiet. No dopamine spikes. No revenge trading. No emotional attachment. Just execution, repeated consistently over time. And this completely changes the meaning of an order block. Because now, you are no longer looking at candles. You are looking at liquidity behavior, institutional incentives, emotional crowd positioning, and hidden execution footprints. The chart stops feeling random and starts feeling readable, not predictable, readable. And that distinction changes everything. Because once you understand order blocks, the next question becomes inevitable. If institutions are leaving footprints everywhere, what other hidden mechanisms has the market been revealing this entire time?